Hello, everybody. My name is Delaney Crow, and I'm the Executive Communications Assistant to our amazing president, Jamie Jones Miller. Jamie has actually been interviewing all of the National Council, so we decided to switch it up, and I'm going to interview her this time. So I met Jamie when my chapter was planning our 75th anniversary fiesta, I guess. And Jamie and I worked together to plan the event, and it was super awesome getting to know her, which eventually just led to future conversations about what Jamie really wanted to bring to the table, her goals for her term as president. So she reached out to me looking for an executive communications assistant, and here we are today. So we're super excited to get to know each other even more throughout this process, and I'm so excited to see how Jamie is really going to make an impact on this chapter. So I guess we'll get right into the questions. So Jamie, starting off, I know that you grew up overseas, so tell me about that experience and what you learned from it.
Sure, and thank you, Delaney. I like to think about my childhood as probably one of the best experiences I could ever have that has led me down my career path. And I know a lot of people don't follow a very linear line when they, are a child. They're not planning out, what they're going to do in 20, 30, 40 years. But it was very natural for me, and it all started because I grew up in Central and South America. My dad grew up in Mexico. He lived there for about 20 years before he went to the University of New Mexico and met my mom. And he went into the Air Force, was a pilot, and then went into the intelligence and what we call the attaché track, where his job would be to be a senior U.S. military representative in a foreign country. And so that took him and my mom all over the United States. And they had a lot of great adventures. And then I came along, and subsequently we were posted overseas. So I grew up living in a English, Spanish speaking household. I grew up living in third world countries where not only was the poverty really heightened, and then the kind of danger of being an American citizen, white with blonde hair, in those countries in the 70s and 80s. It was a very interesting time. So I was driven to school in an armor-plated car, and I lived in a house behind a 15-foot wall with armed guards. And so it was a different childhood than growing up in the States, where you could just get on your bike and ride around the neighborhood. So I think about back to that as really sparking my interest in public service and serving in the government and international affairs. And so that's why at JMU I studied international affairs, Latin American affairs, and that really just kind of set me down this path of working on Capitol Hill and then serving at the Pentagon. So I'm very grateful to my parents for having fallen into, for me, that lifestyle, having grown up into that lifestyle. And then I crave travel. And that's something that's really hard for me during this time right now, wanting to get up and go somewhere. So in any event, I'm really grateful to my parents. It may have been hard at the time, right? I kept feeling like I didn't really have a home. As a military brat, you feel like you're constantly being uprooted. And so I think maybe we'll get to that, but that's part of the reason why I chose JMU and why I chose AST, is to find that kind of home.
Good. That actually perfectly transitioned to the next question I had, which is, how did you decide you wanted to attend JMU?
Yeah, so this is my favorite story. Also goes back to my dad. He's been a huge influence on my life. He had retired from the Air Force and was working in the intelligence business in Northern Virginia. And one of his colleagues had I think a daughter who went to JMU, and he always would be talking about JMU. So my dad decided that he would go to JMU himself and take a tour, and he loved it, came back and said, listen, I will make you a deal. If you take a day off school and let you take a day off school and you can go take a tour of campus. I bet you're gonna love it. And I was like, no, I don't, no, it's too close to home because we were in Falls Church in Northern Virginia at the time. And my dad was like, all right, I'll sweeten the deal. I will talk to your best friend's parents and see if they'll let her take the day off of school. And so he did. And we went and we had a tour. And of course, I loved it, right? Fell in love with campus, loved seeing Greek Row, right? And so I just knew, I was like, this is it. This is the place I want to go. And I wanted to play basketball and had been recruited to a couple other schools, but JMU just really spoke to me. And so that was it. And, now I have to say thanks, Dad, 25 years later for being right on that one.
Yeah, I totally agree. I remember when I toured JMU, it was like the worst weather alive, and it was still the most like beautiful campus. It was like 40-mile-per-hour wind in freezing cold, and it still was just so magical. So go Dukes. What was your recruitment experience like, and why did you end up choosing AST?
So I was very unsure what I wanted to do when I got to campus. I think recruitment was like maybe the second or third week of school. And so it came on pretty fast. And I'd made some really good friends already in those first couple of weeks of school in McGraw Long Hall. And they all were like, we're going to sign up for recruitment. I was like, nah, I don't know. And they're like, just go through it, just do it. And I talked to my mom. She was chapter president of her Alpha Delta Pi chapter at the University of New Mexico. And at the time at JMU, there was not an Alpha Delta Pi chapter. And that's a story for another day. But I thought, okay, I'll go through it and just see what happens. And then, of course, I went to all the houses, and there were a couple of women from my high school who were in the AST chapter. And it just worked out. I felt comfortable there. I felt like people actually cared about me as a person. I felt like they were very supportive of me in wanting to play basketball and doing other things outside the chapter. So ultimately, I went through preference there and another group, and just decided that AST really felt like home. And I was not, like I said, I was not planning to join a sorority. I was not part of the thing. I was just kind of going along with the crowd. And I ended up being the only person on my hall that went through or chose AST. And so everybody else kind of went their different directions. And so I kind of was doing my own thing. And I'm really glad I did. I'm glad I went through recruitment as a freshman. It was scary. It was overwhelming. It was not my scene at all. But to find a place where I could belong, right, and be around a group of people who could be my sisters, my safety net, my cheerleaders, all of those things helped make that transition to college just a lot easier. So I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I stepped outside my comfort zone, and who knew that would set me on my AST path, right?
Yeah, it really changed your life, that's for sure.
Totally changed my life, yeah.
So as we all know, this year's recruitment is going to look really different for a lot of people. Hybrid formats, virtual formats. It is very overwhelming for maybe a freshman who hasn't had any sort of experience or bonding since, March of high school. What would you, if you could give one piece of advice to a freshman who's considering going Greek in this format that maybe isn't as ideal, what would that be?
I would just say, keep an open mind and just take a shot. I think the whole part of going to college is trying new things, getting outside your comfort zone, growing up a little bit, right? Trying something that makes you uncomfortable, meeting new people. And I think the fraternity and sorority experience, especially now, even more so now, is critical to the college experience. Because to your point, we're, freshmen are entering the college experience in a likely mostly virtual format. And they've missed these great milestones and experiences through their senior year of high school, and I know they were looking forward to, being on campus and having that on-campus experience. But a fraternity and sorority can provide you that sense of belonging, that sense of place, that sense of home, a sense of purpose. And to me, that's the most critical thing. Like joining an organization that is values and purpose driven, right? That is looking to make impact in their community, and provide leadership opportunities. I mean, why not? Why not just try it and see? And I know it's intimidating. I mean, it was intimidating for me to walk into the AST chapter house basement with 120 women in there. It would be very intimidating to join a Zoom call, right? But on the other hand, these are some times and some skills that I experience in my work life, right? So for you all to be trying to run a chapter of 180 women, right? And to bring 50 or 60 new women into that organization and to be doing it all virtually, and you're having to manage all these different things, that's very similar to what I'm doing on the outside in the real life. So I would just say, take the long game. Look at this, take the long view. This is the long game for both the chapter and the new member. Yes, it's a little weird and uncomfortable right now, but this is not going to be your only AST experience, right? It's not just going to be the 4 years that you're in school, or the 3 years, or however long you're a member. Take the long view and think about it like the network that you're going to be entering into, that's going to help you find a job potentially, or help you get settled in a new community or new place when you leave JMU, or when you leave your campus. So just try it, go for it. That'd be my advice.
Yeah. Worst thing that can happen is you drop. That's
Yeah.
really the worst thing that can happen. And then you could try it again another time. So
yeah, and try it again next time. Yeah.
Yeah, completely agree. What were some of your favorite memories at JMU and also just within ASD?
Yeah. There's a spot between Carrier Library and D Hall on main campus at JMU that is we called it Ped Plaza, like pedestrian plaza, but there are a lot of like walls and benches and places for you to sit, and was kind of our AST spot on campus where we would congregate. Like you would always know that there'd be an AST sister that you could hang out with in between classes, or there'd just be somebody there. A lot of the older members would hang out there so they could meet the new members and the new member class when they were first joining. So I just have these great memories of, being in the fall, a Thursday afternoon in October, and being on, beautiful campus and sitting out there and just spending time with sisters. I think a lot about living in the sorority house. So I was very lucky. I don't know if everybody would say it that way, but I lived in the chapter house my sophomore, junior, and one semester of my senior year. So we were very serious about having chapter officers live in the house. And also, because I was playing basketball, they wanted me to live on campus. And so I kind of came to this agreement, like, okay, I'm going to keep my grades at a certain point, and I will live on campus, but it's going to be in the sorority house. So we kind of negotiated that. And I just have these great memories of the time spent living in the house, spontaneous stuff that would just happen while we were there. And then being on campus, I mean, the people would go to football games. It wasn't quite as popular as it is now. So we would tailgate, or we would go, I don't know, somewhere around the stadium and spend time with each other, but it wasn't quite the big deal that it is today. And then I've just got a lot of really great memories of exploring around Harrisonburg. So we did, you guys still do this. I see this all on, on social media. We did apple picking, right? We went hiking. We went to Luray Caverns. Like we got out of town and went to some weird diner, like in the middle of nowhere. So I have a lot of great memories of that. And then I can't not mention Tim. So my husband, Tim, is a 2-time JMU alum. We met when I was a junior, and he was a graduate assistant. And so it was great to meet him there. Was not planning on, meeting my future husband in college. But it all worked out. He's in a fraternity. He's a Theta Chi. And so I just have these great memories of us exploring Harrisonburg too, going to El Charro for dinner, playing basketball, that kind of stuff.
Tim's the best. Love him. So fast forward, you graduated from JMU. Then what? Like, walk me through your work experience specifically after you graduated.
Yeah. So I feel like I live this double life in so many ways, right? So I have my sorority life, and then I have my like professional career life. And they they're mutually beneficial. It's interesting. So when I was thinking about graduating and thinking about finding a job, and I know so many seniors are feeling, start to feel this way. It's like, how do you just pick one thing that you're going to do, right? And you apply to so many jobs and you never hear from anything. So I had applied for a position at Defense Intelligence Agency, which is where I interned between my junior and senior years, and thinking, okay, I'm going to be an intelligence in the intelligence collection business, and maybe have this like great career overseas. And so that was what I was thinking I was going to do. And then AST announced that they had their first traveling consultant position. They call it educational consultant now, but paid position where you get to go out and work with chapters all across the country to help develop their officers or help with their chapter operations or even start new chapters. So I applied and got the job, and I got paid $15,000 for 10 months to travel all around the country. No cell phone back then, right? I had a pager and a calling card.
Oh
And
gosh.
so I was out on my own for 10 months. I started 6 or 7 new chapters of AST during that time. And I went to some like just amazing places, also some really obscure places across the country, starting new chapters of AST. And that's how I got my AST start. And I started, after that year was over, I started in a volunteer role serving on our National Panhellenic Conference delegation. And then simultaneously, Tim graduated from JMU with his master's in college student personnel administration and got his first job at the University of South Carolina in Columbia, South Carolina. So we moved down there, got married, and I thought, what on earth am I going to do in Columbia, South Carolina with a degree in international affairs and 1 year of work experience traveling for my sorority? And thank goodness I met and got a job with the son of then United States Senator Fritz Hollings of South Carolina. And that changed the world for me. At the time, I was a kind of a research assistant, a government affairs assistant for Michael Hollings, who was a lobbyist at the state level in South Carolina. And so I got to kind of learn the lobbying consulting business from him. And then Tim and I moved back up to Northern Virginia, and he started working at the George Washington University. And I got a job with a really small lobbying firm and did that for about 3.5 years. And then I decided I really wanted to get into public service. I really wanted to work on Capitol Hill. So I moved to Capitol Hill, and a JMU alum, a fraternity brother of Tim actually, took a chance on me and hired me for a position as a legislative assistant, kind of a mid-level person in a congressional office for a congressman from Virginia. And so I worked my way up from legislative assistant, and I started handling national security issues, and then I became the legislative director. And then I had a friend run for Congress, and he didn't win, but the person who did win the seat, who won, they were looking for someone to come over and run their policy shop. So I made the jump from one member from Virginia to another one from Virginia, and worked for him for almost 9 years, ultimately becoming his chief of staff. And then I got a phone call asking me to go work at the Pentagon at the Department of Defense, and running their legislative affairs shop. So that was my most recent job. I now am back at a small lobbying consulting firm. We work on national security issues. But when I was at the Pentagon, I like to say I was the in-house lobbyist for the Department of Defense, which has a $720 billion budget. So my job was to manage relationships between the Secretary of Defense and senior leaders at the Department of Defense with Capitol Hill. So that really pulled it all together, right? Growing up overseas, my dad being in the military, me interning at the Pentagon when I was at JMU, working on the Hill, and then ultimately 20 years later having this job at DoD. So you can see how JMU and AST kind of fits in there over time, right? So my fraternity and sorority network, 100% helped me land my first job on Capitol Hill. And I will forever be grateful to Tim's fraternity brother, Andy, for opening that door for me.
That's so awesome. I love hearing this story every time. It's so like powerful. So obviously you remained involved with AST as an alum, but how did you stick with JMU? Like, did you ever have any positions with JMU or go back? I know obviously Tim has stayed pretty involved with JMU, but how did you keep your alum status?
Yeah. So Tim and I like to think, I mean, obviously we're married. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary this September in a couple of weeks, actually. We've kind of had this team effort, this partnership. We always knew Tim's dream job he has today, being the Vice President of Student Affairs at JMU, his alma mater. So we always knew in the back of our head that that's like a place we wanted to get to. And I'm not suggesting that I had this like brilliant master plan or anything. However, I knew that staying involved at JMU, both of us, was going to be important. It was going to help us keep one foot in the valley and help really make that dream come true one day. So I volunteered for AST on the chapter advisory board, I think for 3 or 4 years maybe, including when we were living in South Carolina. And then we were up here in Northern Virginia. And then spent a lot of that time trying to recruit other women to be advisors for the Psi chapter. And then probably about 5 years or so after I graduated, 5 or 6 years, I got a call from the JMU Alumni Association, and they were looking for people to serve on their alumni board of directors. And I didn't take it too seriously at the time, but eventually I applied and was interviewed and was selected to serve on the board. So that really helped me keep that connection to JMU. I served on the alumni board for 11 years, I think that's right. Ultimately serving as president of the Alumni Association board. And that was a great way to give back and to see kind of what was going on behind the scenes at JMU. And then also, I mean, Tim and I became season ticket holders for football. So we were always coming back on the weekends. I would come back for women's basketball reunion events and for games and things like that. But I think that the lesson there is not that I necessarily needed to serve on a board or have some sort of role or position at JMU. Like you just need to care, right? Hopefully your college experience is one that you feel positive about your association back to the sorority, also back to your institution, and that you care enough to know what's going on. And whether that's joining your regional or local alumni chapter, either for AST or your college, just staying involved and caring about what's going on is a way to maintain that tie back to the university. And then of course, taking that one step further and in the JMU way of paying it forward, right? Opening doors for others. A lot of people say that they don't have enough money to be a donor. And in AST and at JMU, I mean, every dollar counts, right? So ever since I graduated, I gave back to JMU and to AST, even if it was $18.99 a month, right? I was willing to be able to give back. So those are some of the ways that I maintain my ties. And then the last thing I would say is the women that I met on 3B of McGraw-Long Hall, all of us going in different directions, are still friends to this day, right? We've been in each other's weddings. We're there for each other when there are, horrible, awful things going on, but when there are really great things that are going on. And that's the sorority experience, right? It's not just the 4 years while you're on campus, but it's those ties that you still have to those women long after you've graduated.
Absolutely. I love that. So how did your experience that you just talked about on Capitol Hill and in the Pentagon shape you as a leader? I know those are high positions, but also were there any ugly truths that you had to face as a woman with such high authority in the government?
Yeah. So I think I get asked this question a lot because being a chief of staff to a member of Congress, it's a pretty serious role. For me to look around on Capitol Hill and women in senior roles, there are a lot more today than there were 10 or 15 years ago. There are a lot more women in national security than there were 10 or 15 years ago. But I still have situations where I look around and I'm like, wow, I am the only woman in this room and I am the youngest person in this room. And that happened to me a lot both on Capitol Hill and definitely when I was at the Pentagon. I often had the occasion to attend, the Secretary of Defense had a standing meeting every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And when my boss couldn't go, I was the one that went. And so I would go a couple times a month, probably. And it would be 6 or 7 men and me. And it's not that I was made to feel like I was the only woman in the room or the youngest person in the room. It was never that overt. I was always accepted. My opinion always mattered. But I know that's not always the case, right? I know that is not every woman's experience. And I know, and I joke about it, but I'm sure it's true. I mean, I'm almost 6 feet tall, right? So when I'm wearing heels, sometimes I'm 6'3", maybe. So I definitely have a presence, right? I take up space. And I joke about how that's my superpower, right? If I'm going to be at a table or I'm going to be in a room, I'm going to take up space. I know I'm supposed to be there. I'm going to have a presence. I'm going to say what I think. But getting into that mindset and building that confidence, it takes a lot of time. And so when you ask about how does AST connect to that, I learned a lot of that concept of presence and that self-confidence and that resilience by being a member of the sorority, right? Being tested as a chapter member, as a chapter leader, failing and making mistakes in a safe environment, right? Where I knew I had a lot of people around me who could help me if I fell. Over time, that just built up my confidence. Speaking in front of a chapter meeting of 166 women, for someone in high school, I mean, I would start to sweat and get red and just get really uncomfortable whenever I had to stand up in front of a class, right? So the idea of standing up in front of 166 people was super intimidating. So I got more comfortable with public speaking. So that fast forward 20 years later, when I'm standing in front of the Secretary of Defense and everyone is looking at me as the authority on something in the room, I have that personal confidence to be able to say what what I need to say. So it's definitely tied together. I think this idea of being a leader, like what does that look like? What does a leader look like? And I really believe that anyone can lead from where they are. They don't need this super long title. So my job at the Pentagon, I was the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Legislative Affairs. That's like a big title. I was the equivalent of a 3-star general. Okay, that's kind of the tie. Great title, but you don't need a great title to be a leader, right? People look up, you can be a chapter member who role models the way during recruitment, or by holding an officer position that they may think is minor, but can have a huge impact on the chapter or even on chapter morale, right? Just by how you do your job and handle your business, and by being someone that other people rely on and have confidence in. All of that ties together. And I think having that opportunity as a sorority woman to lead your peers, to have to navigate conflict, right? To stand up in front of the chapter and give your officer report or whatever it might be. Um, for me, all of those things I relied on, even though I may not have known it when I got out into the professional world.
That's so awesome. What was the biggest professional risk, I guess, you took in your time after graduating?
I think when I was considering leaving Capitol Hill, so I'd been on Capitol Hill for 13 years. Um, it was part of my identity. I was very proud to be a Hill staffer. I was really proud to work on Capitol Hill. I was really proud to work for my boss and serve our constituents in Virginia. That was part of who I was. And it seems kind of silly, but being in Washington, D.C., a lot of people define you by where you work and who you work for. So I was very proud to serve and be a Hill staffer. But when I got a phone call from a colleague, a friend, who said, we need talented people at the Department of Defense. You have an opportunity to leverage your congressional expertise on behalf of the department and kind of be a bridge builder between the Department of Defense and Capitol Hill. That was exciting to me, but it was terrifying. And frankly, the hardest part of making the leap from the Hill, which is all I'd known for 13 years, to the Pentagon, was telling my boss, the congressman, because he had taken a chance on me. He had promoted me a couple times in his office. We had a very trusting relationship where he was like, I'm the congressman. I'm going to do the things that only I can do. You're the chief of staff. You run the operation. You're in charge of literally everything else. And that was a lot of responsibility. So for me to then go to him and say, I'm leaving, or I've been presented with this other opportunity, that was really the hardest part of the whole thing, because I didn't want to let him down. And I also wanted to honor him because he had made this investment in me, and had brought me along with him on his career. And he was great. He said, you have an opportunity that a lot of people don't have. And in this case, to work for, at the time, Secretary Madison, who was one of the most, revered military leaders of our modern time. He was like, you have to do this. He said, it would be selfish of me to say no and to hold you back, and I'm not going to do that. So that was the push that I needed, right? That he kind of said, yes, go do this thing. You have to do this thing, and you're still going to be part of my team, even though that you've left. So that made it a lot easier for me to take that leap and that risk of leaving my identity of who I thought I was behind to go do something else. And I'm really glad that I did.
So taking all of this professional experience, I guess, and combining it with what you've learned in your time in AST, what advice would you give to someone who is now like a young college leader, maybe just has a small position, or a chapter president, anywhere in between? What advice would you give?
This is interesting because I think it applies to guidance or mentoring that I provide in a professional setting as well. And so when I'm working with younger members or newer members of my staff, I would tell them the exact same thing. And that is, do the thing that you are supposed to be doing right now really, really well. Do your job to the best of your abilities, right? Put your best foot forward. And other people will see that. They will recognize that you are crushing it at whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing. So whether you are the philanthropy chairman of a chapter, or the social events chairman, or you're the vice president of finance, whatever it is, do that thing really, really well, because that's going to set you up to be successful for the next thing. People will see that you can excel, right, and get a job done. And then they're going to want to then have you go do something else, because they're going to know that you're going to go do that other thing really well. So it seems easy, it seems basic, but I think we spend a lot of time kind of looking over into the future or looking over someone's shoulder or having FOMO of what we're missing out on. And instead of being in the moment and doing whatever it is at that particular point in time really well. So I would say sit with where you are right now, be in that space, be present, and enjoy it. And don't always think about what's coming down the pipeline next.
Yeah, for sure. So you have been now an AST volunteer for what, 2 decades? A long time, regardless.
Yes.
What are you most proud of in the time that you have been an AST volunteer?
Yeah, I mean, something immediately comes to mind, and it's also oddly the same thing I'm most proud of in my professional career. I'm most proud of the fact that I had 2 women who were members of colonies of new chapters that I started as a consultant serve on the National Council. So one was the colony president at Nicholls State University in Thibodaux, Louisiana, and one was, she became chapter president at Chowan University in North Carolina, Delta Rho. And both of those women were elected to the National Council. And that's pretty cool, because that shows to me that when you invest in someone else and you invest in their success, and maybe you're just a cheerleader for them, or maybe you really are their mentor day to day, or maybe it's just you tapped them on the shoulder and said, I see you in this role, or I know you can do this. That really means a lot to somebody. So I'm really proud of that. And then professionally, when I was talking about leaving Capitol Hill and leaving the congressman's office, he asked me to help him find his successor, which he didn't have to, or find my successor. He didn't have to do that, right? He could have chosen whoever he wanted to be his chief of staff, but he involved me in that process. And the thing that I think is most rewarding for me from that experience was that there were multiple people in our office of 20 some who could have been his next chief of staff, because I'd like to think I helped and made investments in those people to help prepare them to serve as chief of staff, either in his office or somewhere else. So it's not a bill that I passed, or it's not a dollar amount that I secured. It's not some project that I completed. It's the idea that when of investing in someone and loving them and helping them grow into whatever it is they're supposed to become, that's what I am most passionate about and most proud of.
Awesome. Did you ever think in college that you wanted to be the national president of AST? Or I guess, like, what was the moment that it kind of clicked that you wanted this position?
Yeah, so no, it never occurred to me that was even a thing. However, we did have a couple visits by national officers to the Psi chapter when I was a member. Not great conversations. I think we were definitely out of line and needed to be reined in a little bit. And looking back now, I understand why they visited us. But I did have the opportunity, and at the time, one of our past national presidents was a Psi from JMU. And so, I knew her and felt like I had a connection to her. And then I was really influenced by a couple of at the time we had volunteers called district presidents who worked with 3 or 4 chapters. This is before we had educational consultants. So we broke down our chapters into districts. And there were several women who were our district presidents who had huge impacts on me, because I saw them as, oh, wow, okay, these women have graduated, but they're still serving the organization. 2 of them I have talked to both of them recently, Anna Galladay and Michelle Flynn. And that's been 20 years. So I didn't at the time say, okay, this is my path in AST, but I did see role models in other people and admired them for how they continue to serve the organization. And then thinking back to like, when did I know that it was time or that I was going to run? So I was elected to the council at a time where we were really ran the organization, or the council, the governing board was really set up like a chapter almost. We had a president, but then we had a director of alumni, a director of extension, a director of collegiate chapters, a director of publications. We had all these very specific siloed roles. And today, we're a much more modern board. We call it a strategic board or a governance board, where we're looking kind of to the future and we're managing the strategic kind of vision for the organization. And then we have this great staff that is executing the day-to-day stuff. So when I ran for the council, I wasn't thinking one day I'm going to run for president. It was more, okay, I want to understand and help contribute from a national level, because I've been volunteering at the chapter level or working with NPC. I want to understand the day-to-day of how the organization functions. And then I think one of the best things that AST has done for me and for countless others has been to say, okay, Jamie, you've excelled in this position. Have you considered doing this other thing? Or I hope you will stay involved, or here are some opportunities that you could get involved in. So I had other women tap me on the shoulder and say, you should stay involved, or have you considered doing this or that? And I'm really grateful for that, because I don't know that I would have stayed involved for that long had I not had the support from other women in the organization. So probably, gosh, maybe it's probably longer than that, 8 years ago, our then national president, Chris Covington, had a lot of conversations with women in the organization about their future service in AST. And she had that conversation with me and with Tiffany Street and others, I'm sure, to say, okay, where do you want to go and how can I help you get there? And how is it going to match up with your professional life and your personal life? So the time was not right for me to run 8 years ago, but it came right for me to run this year in 2020. And yeah, it's taken some personal sacrifice. So I left the Department of Defense to work for a really great consulting and lobbying firm, where they've offered me a lot of flexibility in terms of where I do my work. I'm not working 12 hours a day in a classified space where I can't have access to my cell phone for my email anymore. And I knew that I couldn't be national president if I was still working at the Pentagon, to be honest. And so I made that sacrifice to leave and to move into a different role where I could have a little bit more flexibility to serve, because that's what AST deserves. And it deserves leaders who are focused and are present and are willing to put in the effort to make it work. So I was willing to make that personal sacrifice.
So looking forward to the next few years over your presidency, what, I guess, are you looking forward to the most?
This is a tough one. I knew you were going to ask me a hard question. And the answer I'm going to give you today is totally different than the answer I would have given you if you'd asked me this back in October when I submitted my application to be national president, because the landscape looked totally different. I was really looking forward to getting out and being with members, right? Visiting with members, attending events, going to convention, going to chapter milestones like, size 75th. We have other chapters that are hitting major milestones. I just really wanted to be with our members. And I have learned so much about our organization because my bubble was Psi. I mean, everything, I struggle with that. That's my baggage is I've compared everything to my Psi chapter experience. And not all of our chapters have 200 women, right? And so I really wanted to be on the ground and be out there with our members and learning from them and learning about their experiences and what we can do to make the AST experience better. So I'm having to shift that lens a little bit and how I'm approaching the role now, because how do you do that in a virtual space? So one of the really fun things that you and I have been working together on has been this kind of chapter outreach plan. And I know past national presidents have done similar things. Tiffany Street did a Skype call with every collegiate chapter during her first term. And I'm trying to do the same thing. So I've had a lot of Zoom calls with our chapter leadership over the last month or so. I've heard a lot about what they're feeling and thinking as they're trying to lead a chapter in this virtual environment. So I want to continue doing that. It's been really cool. The negative side of not having convention is that we haven't been able to celebrate the accomplishments of our chapters. But now the cool part is that I get to, and our national council members have been doing virtual awards presentations for our chapters. So we'll Zoom into one of their chapter meetings or exec meetings and give them their convention awards. So that's been pretty cool because it's a lot more personal than standing up in front of the convention body and giving out an award. So I really enjoyed doing that. So the short answer is member engagement, as much of it as I possibly can to learn about our members and hear their stories and then share their stories is something that I'm really focused on, especially these first 2 years. I want to listen. I want to understand what it's like to be a college student today and how AST can help you be successful, not just on your campus, but in your career after you graduate.
Yeah, absolutely. Which of AST's values resonates with you the most and why?
Yes. Some days I wake up and it's one thing, and other days it's something else. I think coming from a military family and working in national security and defense and being at the Pentagon where there's a lot of hierarchy, the easiest answer for me to give would be respect. Because I really feel that being in public service makes me a servant leader. And so this idea of putting others before myself is something that I believe very strongly in. And I think that ties very closely to our value of respect. But really gets me because my personality is such that I'm very self-driven and motivated. And I'm always pushing myself is, of course, excellence, right? This idea that we have a disdain for mediocrity, and that is really powerful, right? That we always want to grow, we're lifelong learners, that we are defining excellence in all the things that we do. Could you imagine if every member of the organization got up in the morning and said, how am I going to be excellent today? Excellent for myself, excellent for my sisters, excellent for my community. Imagine the possibilities if we were all thinking about driving towards excellence every day. You got me?
Yeah, is my internet bad?
Yep, you were frozen for a second.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Okay. Did you want to repeat any of that part, or
I think it will record. I think the recording I think it'll be fine.
Okay.
Because it records what's coming through the computer. So I think we should be okay.
Okay, cool. Okay, next question. So I think we can all tell by now that you're a very busy woman. How do you stay organized in your day-to-day life? And do you have any tricks or hacks on how to stay organized?
Yeah, so I have always been a paper planner person. I write everything down in my planner, have a calendar in my planner. I use my iPhone and my Gmail calendar. I'm sure people think my Gmail inbox is atrocious, but everything is tagged or labeled because I like to be able to sort things by, so I'll tag, I have a 2020, 2022 national president, label in my Gmail. so that I can go back and sort through my email inbox. I think for me, my biggest hack, I will look on Friday at the end of the week what my schedule looks like for the following week, and I'll start making some notes about what some priorities are or people that I need to call or reach out to. And then I'll do the same thing on Monday. So my staff or my office has a meeting every Monday morning at 9. So before our 9 o'clock Monday meeting, I will go through, okay, what does the week look like? What deliverables do I have? Who do I need to connect with? What do I need to close the loop from last week that didn't get closed out? So I think my brain is just very calendar driven and very milestone driven. I'm a to-do list person. I don't quite go that far as like writing something down so I can check it off my to-do list, but I definitely use a list and I take a lot of notes. And that's a habit I picked up at JMU. I would go to class and I would basically write for the whole hour and a half, right? I would take a lot of notes and then I would go back through and highlight my notes, or I would write notes in the margins of my books. And that just really helps me learn. So I think that's probably, a lot of people say, if you're writing notes, you're not paying attention, but that's what helps me process. So one of the things that I do now, I will go back at the end of the week as well and go through my notes and look at maybe what I've highlighted or kind of what I need to check off for the following week. And that really helps me stay organized.
Yes, I love lists. I'm a big list fan. I use my notes app every single day. I make lists of, usually in the beginning of the week, what I need to do every single day to just time everything out with this online format of everything. I just need to have it all right there.
Yeah. And that's hard too, because I want to make sure. So at the Pentagon, I didn't have access to my phone during the day. So for you, when you're going to class or you're going to a meeting, you've got your phone, right? Or your laptop. When I was in the building or in a meeting, you are there. You are in the meeting. There is no distraction of checking your cell phone or you're getting bored and you're getting on social media or, whatever. There is none of that. So you are fully present. And that has been a big adjustment for me to be out in the real world where I have my phone with me all the time because it's really easy to get distracted. So I've been trying to kind of balance that so that there are times when I give myself permission to check social media or check my personal email during the workday. But it was a rude awakening to go from 10 or 12 hours a day with no phone to all of a sudden having my phone all the time. And not to mention the fact that when I left the Pentagon, this is the first time since 2004 that I've only had one cell phone. So that's been weird too.
Yeah, I can't imagine. My cell phone is totally my biggest distraction. The other day I was taking notes and I just kept finding myself just let me check and not do my notes. And it got to the point where I just had to move my phone to the other side of the room because it's just so distracting. It's the worst.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a problem for everybody. Okay, so walk me through a day in the life of Jamie. So how do you start the day? What's your routine if you're more of a morning person or a night person? What's your schedule?
Yeah. So I will say life in the Pentagon and life today, because I'm still kind of figuring out what my routine is. So life in the Pentagon, I live maybe 25 minutes away. And I usually, it starts early at the Pentagon. Meetings will start at 7, even before that sometimes. So I would get up pretty early, and I liked to be at my desk no later than 7:30. And so that made for a really long day because sometimes I wasn't leaving until 6, 7, 7:30 at night. So when I was doing that, I would get up and just get going, get to the office, get settled, and then I would work out when I came home. And then it would be I'd get home and then I'd have an 8 o'clock AST call. Sometimes I would be dialing in by phone to an AST call at 8 when I was in my car on the way back from the Pentagon, and then jumping on when I actually got home. today, especially now that we've been in COVID, and I've just started a new job, I'll get up, I'll walk the dog in the morning. I'll sleep in a little bit. That's been a kind of a gift. So instead of being at my desk by 7:30, like I'll be awake by 7:30. So I'll get up, walk the dog for about an hour, and then have breakfast and kind of come into my home office and get my day settled. I like to, in the morning, I try not to schedule a lot of calls in the morning because I like to get some of my work done. But now I have clients and other things, like my schedule is not always under my control. So I will try and power through as much of my to-do list as I can in the morning. I'm way more productive in the morning than I am in the afternoon, I think. And now during COVID, I mean, I'll have client calls, I'll have webinars, I'll do a fundraiser for a member of Congress, I'll watch a hearing online on Capitol Hill. Maybe I'll type up my notes and send stuff out to other members of my team. I'll take a lunch break and maybe answer some AST emails. And then usually starting around 6 or 7, I'll start to have AST calls, 2, 3, 4 nights a week. And then the best part of my day really is, I try to make time to reach out to my friends and family. And I feel like it has to be very intentional. I'm not necessarily an extrovert. Maybe I'm an introvert with extrovert tendencies. So I could go weeks at home and like not see anybody and I would be fine. That's probably because I'm an only child and like I'm used to doing my own thing. But I don't want to just be in this bubble now where I never reach out to anybody or I don't talk to anybody. So I've got to very intentionally and deliberately do that. And then by, 10 usually, my AST stuff's wrapped up, my calls are wrapped up. I like to read. I read a lot of fiction. And so I'll try and read before I go to bed and then I'll crash and get up and do it all over again. So I think my schedule is probably the same as most people's now, right? Trying to get in the routine of getting myself out of bed and at the same time every day, figuring out how to get my personal stuff done, getting my work done, and being in front of the computer screen all day. It's not fun, right? I really wish I was with people. It's hard, it's exhausting. You get Zoom fatigue for sure, but it's just, I have to think this isn't always going to be the way it is, right? I have to look forward and think, okay, there will be a time where we all be able to back together again. And then the last thing, my office, my new office, we have a great space downtown. It's in a beautiful brand new building with glass windows, and I really like going into my office. I am not a work from home person. I'm not made for this. I know a lot of people are loving it, but it is not for me. So I've been going into my office a couple days a week, probably since maybe May. And I rarely see another person in there. So I like going in and I can get stuff done a lot better at work than I can at home.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I am not thriving in the online setting. Like, I eventually will get the work done, but sitting at my desk and like trying to tell myself I need to do all my work right here and like teach my Okay, so from everything you just said, it sounds like you're just busy all the time. But does the work-life balance exist for you? And how do you switch off from work mode 100%?
Yeah. I think this idea of work-life balance is a myth. I don't think it's 50. I guess I don't think it's 50-50, right? I don't think it's going to be a perfect split that you can ever achieve that perfect split. I think every day is a new balance there. Maybe some days you're 70%, on the work side and 30% on the personal side. I think for me, it's more a matter of knowing kind of what my limits and my boundaries are. So knowing when I do my best work, so that's when I should be doing, if I know I've worked better in the morning, like let me set myself up to be successful, and do the work in the morning if I know in the afternoon I'm going to want to be outside, right? So I don't believe in the work-life balance myth at all. But I do think that having things to do outside of work is extremely important. I think, being a part of the sorority in and of itself kind of gives me that relief valve. It helps me recharge my batteries. I mean, I was really, it's going to sound cheesy, but I was really sad about not having convention, because I can recharge my batteries, my AST batteries, my personal batteries by being around AST sisters. Like, that's why I love coming to campus, and being on campus and seeing the students, or coming to see you guys in the chapter. It helps me recharge the batteries for what lies ahead. And so I think it's really important to have some of that outside, other activity that you do besides go to class or go to work. And it's just a matter of any given day trying to figure out, okay, what do I need to get done for the job that pays me, and what do I need to get done for myself? Because I think right now I'm tired, right? I'm ready for things to ready for there to be some end in sight, right? I'm ready for there to be a corner that we can turn. And I don't quite see that yet. So I can't lose the discipline of getting up every day and walking the dog and trying to drink a lot of water and, be a healthy eater and work out and all those things, because I know that's going to help me get through to whatever the next thing is.
Yeah, absolutely. You had mentioned this in the very beginning, but you said traveling is something that's super important to you, super part of your childhood. So when the world opens back up for us, where are you hoping to go? Do you have any destinations on your wish list right now?
So many. So Tim and I were really hoping to go to Greece for our 20th anniversary this fall. Obviously, that's not happening. Italy's been on my wish list for a long time. I would just, that's a part of the world that I haven't been to. 2 years ago in August and October, I got to go on some really great trips for work. So in August of 2018, I went on a Central and South America trip. So we did Cuba, Brazil, Honduras, which was the first time I'd been back since we moved some 30 years before that. It had been 30 years since I visited Honduras. And Suriname and Guyana in South America. And people don't go to Suriname and Guyana. They're not major travel destinations. Like, nobody gets to go to Cuba. We visited Guantanamo Bay, where we keep some of the worst threats to this country. So that was a really cool experience, and then be able to return to Honduras was great. And then October of 2018, I went on a 10-day trip to Africa, and we started in Germany, which is now the headquarters of U.S. Africa Command. Strange, the Africa Command is in Europe, not on the continent of Africa, but that's a whole other story. So we started in Germany, and then we did Rwanda, South Africa, Botswana, Angola, Tunisia, and then Portugal. And I have to go back to Africa. It's just hard to explain the vastness and the beauty of the country and the people. So I absolutely have to go back. So yeah, Greece, Italy, and then Tim and we've got to go to Africa together. I felt terrible that, I go on these great work trips and Tim didn't get to travel with me. So that's the plan. And then we love the Outer Banks. We go to the Outer Banks 2 or 3 times a year. Tim's family's been going for 40 years. So that's kind of the dream is, one day could we have a house, maybe in the valley at JMU and a house down in the Outer Banks. So we're going to try and go in October for a week. So beach, mountains, lake, wherever. I just like to get out and travel, and hopefully be able to go back overseas soon.
Yeah. I love traveling. I wish I could have, well, but I was supposed to study abroad this summer in Dublin, and it's definitely for the better that it didn't happen. It would have been way too crazy, but I have that is like my number one travel destination right now, to live what I should have lived this summer.
Well, let's see what we can get figured out for when you graduate.
Yeah, right?
Right? Yeah.
Honestly, I'm down. Okay. So last question for you. So college students are really living through this rough patch right now. Kind of just touched on it, but college experience is kind of being compromised because the priority is to keep everybody safe. We just saw that with JMU going online for the next month at least. Recruitment, as we touched on earlier, there's just a whole cluster of things that have changed, and there's nothing we can really do about it. What advice do you have for college students to get through this hard time right now?
I think that college students today have to be very resilient. And it's hard to practice resiliency. And the sorority experience gives you a place to try new things and maybe to fail and to recover with kind of a safety net, right? And I think being a student today and trying to figure out who you are as a person and what you want to be when you grow up, what you want to major in, what you want to do for your career. There's a lot of tough decisions and things that you're trying to navigate when you're in college. And so I empathize with that because I remember myself being in that same position, right? I didn't know necessarily, I thought I had a plan for what I wanted to do, and then AST presented me with a different option, and so I went down that path. I bring up resilience because, you asked me about my path to being national president. I applied to be chapter president and wasn't slated. And I think now back to that time, I was slated and I became chapter treasurer. And I thought, okay, well, if this sucks. Like, I'm really disappointed. I was disappointed. It was very humbling to not get what you want. And I had to believe that there was a reason for that. I had to believe there was a reason to be selected to be chapter treasurer. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be the best chapter treasurer that we've ever had, right? And so, and then I look back and I'm like, well, I don't know that was a failure. It was just a different path for me to take. And how I responded to that moment of learning I wasn't going to be chapter president, being asked to take on a different role with different responsibilities, my path could have gone two completely different directions based on how I responded in that moment, right? And I'm grateful that I kind of failed fast and recovered and said, okay, I'm going to do the best job that I possibly can as chapter treasurer. So the reason I talk about that story is that this idea of being resilient and doing the best you possibly can in the circumstances that are in front of you, but also be willing to ask for help and being willing to rely on the people around you to help you be successful, to me is extremely important. And so then that leads me to being in the college environment, whether it's virtual or it's in person, and being in the sorority environment, is that we are very lucky. I know that I am very privileged to have gone to college and to both of my parents be invested in my success, and for me to be able to have a job in the summer, and for my parents to help to support me and pay for me to go to college. I know not everybody is in that same experience, and I recognize and I honor that. And to me that means we've got to make the most of what we have, and grow through that experience. So my advice to our college students today is just hang in there. Make the most of what's in front of you. Being in a sorority is a gift, right? We talk about the friendships and the relationships that you make throughout your sorority, and look at it take the long view. This is not just about fall 2020. The things that you are doing today are going to set you up to be successful tomorrow, and the day after that, and a year after that, and 4 years after that. So choices that you're making today are going to help set you up to be successful down the road. And I very firmly believe that me making the choice to join Alpha Sigma Tau, to say yes when that was not part of my plan, has been instrumental in my, any success that I have personally or professionally. And I'm really grateful that I took the leap and took a chance and said, yeah, I'm going to join and I'm going to see what happens. And I'm really glad that I did. So back to how we started this conversation, just be willing to take a chance. Commit to what it is that you're doing today. Think about how you can be excellent when you get up every morning, and how you can help other people demonstrate that value of excellence, because collectively we're going to have a lot of impact if we all have that mindset.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me today via Zoom and talking with me through, your journey and your experience and your takeaways from everything that's built you up so far. I love listening to these stories, even though I'd heard some of them before. It's just so powerful and inspiring, and really does make you want to be a better person and take the sorority experience, above and beyond. So thank you again for talking with me today. I'm so glad we got to see each other, even though it was virtual.
Well, I appreciate it, Delaney, and thank you for your leadership at Sci and within AST, and for helping me achieve my goals as president, and reaching out and working with our chapters. So thank you for that. And I hope I will be able to see you soon, either at JME or somewhere else.
Yeah.
So hang in there. I am rooting for you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who watched this. Hope you guys enjoyed.